Right now, you probably believe that if you were forced to take like a 2-week break from the gym, your body is just going to aggressively betray you.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone feels that way.
Right. You think all the muscle you've spent, months or even years building will just vaporize. Just because you missed a few workouts to focus on some massive work deadline or maybe a family vacation.
Yeah, the classic fear of turning into a melting popsicle the second you stop lifting.
Exactly. But you are wrong. And the biology actually proves that it requires a minimum of 14 days of complete immobilized bed rest to lose any actual structural muscle tissue.
Bed rest, like literally lying flat on your back in a hospital without moving a single limb.
Yeah, exactly. If you're walking to the fridge, you're not in bed rest. So today, we are completely dismantling the anxiety of the busy professional.
It is so needed.
It really is. We're unpacking the exact evidence-based science of the minimum effective dose for muscle maintenance. We've got this stack of incredibly detailed scientific briefings to go through today.
Some really great stuff in there, too.
Totally. And they're paired with this fascinating series of visual case studies that map strength and aging across different environments.
So our mission for this deep dive is to build an airtight, biologically sound protocol for those weeks when you just feel like you are drowning in obligations.
And it is a critical mission, really,
Yeah.
primarily because the cognitive distortion surrounding detraining is arguably, it's the single biggest threat to long-term health.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you're saying the mindset is actually more dangerous than the missed workouts.
100%. We operate under this immense psychological pressure, right?
Yes.
Where our brain insists that if we cannot execute our meticulously planned, like 5-day-a-week routine, doing anything less is just utterly pointless.
The whole all or nothing trap.
Exactly. And it is a fundamental misunderstanding of evolutionary biology. Maintaining the structural adaptations you have already forced your body to make is orders of magnitude easier than forcing the initial adaptation.
Wait, really? Orders of magnitude? Oh, yeah. The data shows you can keep approximately 90% of your physical progress on literally 10% of your usual effort.
Okay, that 10% figure is exactly where I want to anchor our discussion, because that just completely flies in the face of the fitness industry's constant, grind mentality.
It really does. It's totally countercultural to the fitness world.
But before we get into the actual math of how 10% functions in a practical routine, we really have to look at the immediate disconnect between our minds and our bodies.
Right, because the mind panics immediately.
Yeah, exactly. When a busy professional gets trapped at their desk for a week, and actually there is a great image in our visual case studies of this. It's an older woman hunched over this rustic desk.
Oh, I love that picture.
Right. She's illuminated by this harsh lamp completely buried in binders and papers. You can almost feel the background radiation of her anxiety just looking at it.
You really can.
We sit in that chair, we aren't moving, and we assume the body's just like breaking down our biceps and quads for spare parts.
What's fascinating here is that from a purely biological standpoint, that makes zero sense.
Really? Why not? It feels like it makes sense.
Well, evolutionary biology dictates that skeletal muscle is incredibly metabolically expensive tissue. Your body had to invest a massive amount of systemic energy, amino acids, and recovery resources to synthesize those contractile proteins.
So it's a huge investment.
A massive investment. And the human organism is fundamentally a hoarder of expensive resources. It is not going to casually catabolize hard-earned tissue just because you've been sitting in an office chair for 8 days.
That makes sense. It wouldn't just throw away something it worked so hard to build.
Exactly. In a natural ancestral environment, a period of physical inactivity might indicate that you are recovering from a severe illness, or maybe you're conserving energy during a famine.
Oh, interesting. So resting was actually a survival mechanism?
Right. And the physiological response is to fiercely protect the tissue you have already proven is necessary for your survival. Because, just in case you need to sprint away from a predator or lift a heavy load the very moment that famine ends or the illness breaks.
Okay. I understand the evolutionary logic there, but I got to challenge this based on what we actually experience in reality.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because the biology might say the tissue doesn't disappear. But if I take 2 weeks off completely, I am absolutely going to look in the mirror and see a smaller version of myself.
You will. You definitely will.
Right. Like my shoulders look deflated, my shirts fit differently, the measuring tape might even show a smaller circumference on my arms or legs. So if I am not experiencing muscle atrophy, what is physically happening under the skin to create that illusion?
It is a highly convincing illusion, I'll give you that. but it stems from a total misunderstanding of what actually makes up the volume of a muscle belly.
Okay, so it's not the actual muscle fibers disappearing.
No, not at all. What you are observing is not a loss of contractile tissue, like the actual actin and myosin protein filaments, but rather a dramatic shift in intramuscular fluid and energy storage.
Energy store, you mean glycogen.
Exactly, glycogen. When you are training regularly, applying that consistent metabolic stress, your muscles adapt by supercompensating their local energy reserve.
Getting ready for the next workout.
Right. They store vast amounts of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen, which serves as this rapid access fuel for high-intensity contractions.
And glycogen doesn't just sit there dry, right?
hmm
I've read that the molecular structure of glycogen actually requires it to bind to water.
You hit the nail on the head. The biochemical reality is that every single gram of glycogen stored within the muscle cell obligates the storage of roughly 3 to 4 grams of water.
3 to 4 grams, that's a lot of water.
It is an osmotic imperative. So
Yeah.
your muscle cells are essentially maximally hydrated balloons when you're training.
Oh, wow. I never thought of them as water balloons.
Yeah, and when you cease training for a week or two, the body recognizes that it no longer needs to keep those emergency energy reserves quite so topped off. The metabolic demand has temporarily dropped.
Because you're just sitting at the desk.
Right. So consequently, it begins to deplete the stored glycogen, and with it, all that associated water is just flushed out of the muscle tissue.
So the total volume of the muscle decreases, which registers in the mirror as, shrinking. But the actual engine, the structural proteins capable of generating force, is entirely untouched.
Exactly.
You've just drained the temporary fuel tanks.
Precisely. You lose what bodybuilders colloquially call your pop, or your fullness.
But the tissue's still there.
Yep. And the moment you return to the gym and introduce a hypertrophic stimulus again, those glycogen stores are replenished within about 48 hours. The water rushes back in via osmosis, and the muscle instantly returns to its previous volume.
It's like reinflating the balloon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Recognizing this mechanism is really the very first step in dismantling that all-or-nothing panic.
That is so reassuring. So if we accept that the engine remains intact and we are just dealing with fluctuating fuel levels, the obvious next step is figuring out exactly what kind of minimal stimulus is required to prevent the body from eventually deciding to, actually dismantle the engine.
Right, because eventually it will start to break down if you do nothing for long enough.
Right. And you mentioned 10% earlier, which perfectly aligns with the landmark 2011 study by Bickel and colleagues that's highlighted in our briefing.
Oh, the Bickel study. It is foundational.
Let's really dig into the methodology of this study, because I think the timeline and the parameters are what make it so shocking to people.
Yeah, the Bickel study is absolute required reading when analyzing the dose-response relationship of detraining. So the researchers recruited 2 distinct cohorts for this.
Who were they?
They had a younger demographic, aged roughly 20 to 35, and an older demographic, aged 60 to 75.
Good spread.
Yeah. And they initiated this highly rigorous, standardized resistance training protocol spanning 16 weeks.
16 weeks. So about 4 months of hard training.
Right. This was designed to build a substantial baseline of muscular hypertrophy and neuromuscular adaptation. They were doing a high-volume routine, essentially 3 days a week of heavy, progressive overload.
So they spent 4 months really building these people up, maximizing their tissue. But the real meat of the study is what they did next, right?
Exactly.
Because they didn't just have them stop training entirely. They slashed their volume dramatically for an entire 8-month maintenance phase.
8 months.
8 months is an incredibly long time to try and hold on to progress with just a fraction of the work.
It is, and that extended time frame is precisely why the data from the study is so robust.
So what did they find?
Let's look at the younger cohort first. During that 8-month period, the researchers found that to completely maintain the muscle cross-sectional area and the peak strength metrics they had built during the initial 16 weeks.
To maintain all of it.
All of it. The 20 to 35-year-olds only required 1/9 of their previous training volume.
Wait, 1/9.
1/9.
Let's translate that into actual gym mechanics for a second.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a fairly standard routine, say 3 days a week, and I'm hitting my chest with 3 heavy sets of bench press on each of those days,
Okay, yeah.
that is 9 total working sets for the chest per week. This study suggests I could drop that to 1 single working set for the entire week and hold my ground for 8 months.
That is exactly what the data shows.
Biologically, how is that even possible? Why doesn't the body recognize that the total systemic stress has plummeted by almost 90% and just start shedding tissue?
Well, because skeletal muscle operates on a binary signaling threshold for maintenance, not a cumulative tally.
A binary signal, like a light switch.
Exactly like a switch. The nervous system and the local tissue, they do not contain some biological abacus that counts total repetitions or total time under tension just to justify their
Well, I
existence.
don't care about the total workload.
Right. They only respond to peak mechanical tension and the resulting chemical signaling. When you lift a heavy weight, you cause mechanotransduction.
Mechanotransduction. What is that exactly?
It's the conversion of mechanical stress into cellular chemical signals. You activate the mTOR pathway, which regulates cell growth and protein synthesis.
Right, I've heard of mTOR. But surely 9 sets activate that pathway more than just one set, right?
They do, which is exactly why 9 sets are required to force the tissue to adapt and grow larger in the first place. You are accumulating enough metabolic fatigue and microtrauma to force an overcompensation.
To build the muscle.
Yes. But maintenance does not require overcompensation. Maintenance simply requires a periodic reminder to the nervous system that the organism might still encounter maximal environmental demands.
Like checking in to see if you still need the muscle.
Exactly. One single, highly intense set provides that peak mechanical tension. It trips the biological wire. The brain registers the maximum force requirement, ticks the survival box, and upregulates protein synthesis just enough to prevent the degradation of the tissue capable of producing that force.
It's basically a biological roll call. You just have to prove the capacity is still necessary.
That's a great way to put it, a biological roll call.
But that math changes significantly when we look at the second cohort in the Bickel study, the older demographic, the 60 to 75-year-olds.
Yes, it does.
We actually have 2 visual case studies that perfectly contrast these groups.
Oh, the images from the briefing?
Yeah. The younger cohort is represented by this silhouette of a strong figure with a gym bag stepping out into a chaotic, bustling city street, which kind of represents the resilient, fast-recovering biology of youth, meeting the chaotic schedule of early career life.
It's a very evocative image.
Right. But the older demographic is represented by a stunning macro photograph of a pair of deeply weathered, heavily lined hands gripping a chalked barbell. And for those weathered hands, the 1/9 rule didn't apply, did it?
It did not. The researchers discovered that the older demographic required approximately 1/3 of their previous volume to maintain their muscular cross-sectional area and strength over that same 8-month period.
One.
Yes. So using your bench press analogy again, instead of dropping from 9 sets down to 1, they would need to drop from 9 sets to 3 sets per week.
Okay, that is a significant biological discrepancy. I mean, that's a 300% increase in the minimum required dose just based on chronological age.
It is a substantial jump.
I know we broadly use the term anabolic resistance to describe this, but what is the actual endocrinological or cellular breakdown happening in those older hands that demands a louder signal?
Anabolic resistance is a really multifaceted physiological shift. As we age, our muscle fibers, particularly the fast-twitch type 2 fibers, which are responsible for explosive strength and size, they become inherently less sensitive to the 2 primary drivers of protein synthesis,
Which are what?
dietary amino acids and mechanical tension.
So the receptors on the cells literally become blunted.
That is a very accurate way to conceptualize it. The intracellular signaling pathways, specifically the efficiency of that mTOR pathway we mentioned earlier, they become sluggish.
They just don't react as quickly.
Right. Furthermore, there are changes in motor unit recruitment. The nervous system becomes slightly less efficient at recruiting those large, high-threshold motor units during a single bout of exercise.
Meaning you can't activate all the muscle fibers as easily.
Exactly. Therefore, to ensure that the entire muscle belly receives the necessary mechanical tension to trigger that maintenance signal, an older individual has to apply that stress more frequently.
So one set just isn't enough to get the message across.
Right. One set might not fully activate the sluggish pathways, but 3 sets provide enough cumulative mechanical and metabolic stress to push through the blunted sensitivity and deliver the maintenance memo.
That makes a lot of sense. But even with that blunted sensitivity, requiring only 1/3 of your previous volume is still an incredibly liberating metric.
Oh, absolutely.
It means a 65-year-old can still cut their gym time by over 60% and not lose an ounce of tissue.
Which is huge for longevity and just quality of life.
Definitely. And this leads us directly to the practical application of all this data. If 1/9 or 1/3 volume is the scientific benchmark, how do we pragmatically map that onto the life of someone who literally does not have the time to drive to a facility with a squat rack?
This is where the practical protocol comes in.
Yeah, the briefing outlines a specific 15 to 30-minute weekly protocol, and I really want to scrutinize the biomechanical choices here
Let's do it.
because it's very specific.
The protocol is stripped down to the absolute biomechanical essentials. It demands one highly intense set of push-ups, one highly intense set of pull-ups or an inverted row, and one highly intense set of split squats or lunges.
Just those three.
Just those three. And this sequence is to be executed once, perhaps twice a week.
Okay, the exercise selection here clearly isn't arbitrary. If we only have 3 movements to send a systemic biological signal, why are we prioritizing, say, a split squat over a leg extension or a hamstring curl?
It fundamentally comes down to the magnitude of the systemic disruption. A leg extension is an isolation movement. It targets the quadriceps, rotating around a single joint, the knee. The overall mechanical tension is extremely localized, and the systemic metabolic response is relatively low.
Just not stressing the whole body.
Exactly. A split squat, conversely, is a multi-joint compound movement. You are simultaneously loading the quadriceps, the gluteus maximus, the hamstrings as dynamic stabilizers, and engaging the entire core musculature to maintain an upright torso under a unilateral load.
So you're recruiting vastly more total muscle mass per repetition.
Exponentially more. And this raises an important question. Why does that matter for the signal? Well, when you recruit more total muscle mass, you generate a significantly larger endocrine response.
A hormonal response.
Right. The local tissue damage and metabolic byproduct accumulation are much higher, which sends a much louder systemic signal to the brain that the body is under a severe environmental demand.
It's a bigger emergency.
Exactly. The push-up operates on the exact same principle for the anterior chain chest, shoulders, triceps, and core stabilization, while the pull-up recruits the entire posterior chain and biceps.
So in 3 movements, you have forced almost every major muscle group to contract against gravity.
You've hit the entire system.
We actually have a visual case study of a woman in her 50s doing exactly this.
It's a great example of the accessibility.
She's holding a rigid push-up position on a yoga mat, but she's situated right next to a home office desk, cluttered with a laptop, cords, and coffee mugs. It perfectly illustrates how you can just do this anywhere.
You really don't need a gym.
But this brings up a crucial technical caveat. If I am only doing 1 set of push-ups and 1 set of split squats a week, the margin for error on the intensity is virtually 0.
The intensity is everything here.
The briefing uses the term proximity to failure, which is often wildly misinterpreted by people. Let's dig into the neurology of this. Why isn't it enough to just do push-ups until my arms feel a little tired?
To understand proximity to failure, we have to look at Henneman's size principle of motor unit recruitment.
Henneman's size principle. Okay, break that down for us.
Your nervous system is relentlessly efficient. When you begin a set of push-ups, the mechanical demand is initially quite low. Your brain only activates the smallest, most fatigue-resistant motor units, which control the slow-twitch muscle fibers.
The slow twitch one.
Right. These fibers are great for endurance, but they possess very little potential for hypertrophy or generating maximum force.
Because the brain won't waste high-octane fuel if it doesn't have to.
Exactly. Why use the big engines when the small ones will do? But as you continue to perform repetitions, those slow-twitch fibers begin to fatigue.
They get tired.
Right. The mechanical tension on the active fibers increases, and the speed of your movement involuntarily slows down. To keep your body moving, the nervous system is forced to recruit progressively larger, higher threshold motor units.
Like in the reinforcements.
Exactly. These are the units that control the massive, fast-twitch muscle fibers.
Ones that actually give a muscle its size and shape.
Precisely. Now, if you stop the set when your muscles merely begin to burn, or when the effort just feels moderately uncomfortable, you have only recruited the lower threshold fibers.
So the big fiber is never even turned on.
Right. The large, fast-twitch fibers, the ones that are metabolically expensive and the very first to atrophy if ignored, they have remained entirely dormant. They haven't received the mechanical tension required to signal maintenance.
So you did the work, but you didn't send the signal.
Exactly. To recruit the entire muscle, you must push the set to the point where the velocity of the movement grinds to an almost complete halt, despite your maximal conscious effort to move fast.
Like you're trying to push up quickly, but you're just crawling.
Yes. You should reach a point where you might be able to complete one final agonizing repetition with a severely compromised tempo, but a subsequent repetition would result in literal mechanical failure. You would collapse.
That is true proximity to failure.
That is the only way to ensure the signal is sent on a single set.
It is an incredibly uncomfortable place to go. But, I mean, when you are only doing one set a week, you have to maximize the recruitment.
There's no other way around it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source text has this brilliant analogy for this exact routine. It calls it a security blanket.
I love this analogy.
Think about the psychology of a security blanket for a toddler. It doesn't teach them how to read, it doesn't solve complex problems, but it provides a profound, foundational reassurance that everything in their immediate environment is stable.
Right, it calms the nervous system.
Exactly. When you are executing this 15-minute protocol during a chaotic week, you have to fundamentally shift your psychological objective. You are no longer in the gym to set a personal record.
You're not trying to grow.
Right. You are not trying to force new adaptation. You are simply holding a biological security blanket. You're providing a systemic reassurance policy to your nervous system. You're telling it, we are still functioning, keep the tissue, the storm will pass.
And that psychological shift is paramount. You are intentionally downshifting to stall loss. Once you accept that maintenance is an active, successful state of being rather than like a failure to progress, the guilt surrounding missed workouts completely evaporates.
It's so freeing. But let's look at the worst case scenario for a minute.
Okay.
Because even with the perfect 15-minute security blanket protocol, life is unpredictable. Sometimes the minimum effective dose is just impossible.
True. Life happens.
You require a major surgery, you have a complicated pregnancy, you suffer an injury that requires total immobilization, sometimes a longer layoff happens, and because you fall below that 1/9 threshold,
Right.
you legitimately do lose structural tissue.
It does happen.
Months later, you look in the mirror, the glycogen's gone, and the contractile tissue has definitively atrophied. What is the biological reality of starting over?
This is where we transition from the mechanics of maintenance to the architecture of recovery. And it involves perhaps the most forgiving and remarkable mechanism in human physiology: muscle memory.
Okay, I want to be extremely precise here, because muscle memory is a heavily polluted term.
Oh, it really is.
Most people use it to describe motor learning, like the neurological grooving of a pattern, like riding a bicycle or swinging a golf club. But in the context of hypertrophy and regaining lost tissue, we are talking about a deeply cellular, physiological phenomenon, correct?
We are talking entirely about cellular architecture. To grasp this, we really must examine the unique structure of skeletal muscle cells.
Okay, how are they different?
Well, unlike the vast majority of cells in the human body, which possess a single nucleus acting as the central command center for DNA transcription and protein synthesis, muscle fibers are extraordinarily massive, elongated cells.
So one nucleus isn't enough.
Right. A single nucleus cannot possibly govern the entire cytoplasmic volume of a muscle fiber. Therefore, muscle cells are multinucleated.
Multinucleated, so they have lots of nuclei.
Hundreds, sometimes thousands of nuclei scattered along the length of the fiber.
Is the concept of the myonuclear domain.
Exactly.
Each nucleus can only manage a specific radius of cellular territory. Like if you have a massive manufacturing floor, one foreman can't oversee a mile-long assembly line, so you have to hire multiple foremen to manage different sectors of the factory.
That is a flawless analogy, yes. When you engage in heavy resistance training and force a muscle to undergo hypertrophy, the cell expands in volume. The existing nuclei cannot stretch their domain to manage the new, larger territory.
They need more help.
Exactly. In order to synthesize the proteins necessary to build and maintain this larger structure, the muscle fiber must acquire more nuclei.
But where does it get them? A cell can't just spontaneously generate a new nucleus, can it?
It cannot. It relies on satellite cells.
Satellite cells, what are those?
These are essentially specialized stem cells that reside on the periphery of the muscle fiber, sandwiched between the basal lamina and the sarcolemma.
Just kind of hanging out on the outside.
Right. When the muscle undergoes mechanical stress and microtrauma, these satellite cells activate, they proliferate, and they actually fuse with the mature muscle fiber, donating their nuclei.
Oh, wow. They merge into the cell.
Yes. The muscle fiber permanently gains more control centers, permanently increasing its capacity for protein synthesis.
Okay, so you train hard for 3 years. Your muscle fibers expand. They absorb thousands of new myonuclei from these satellite cells, and the factory is running at maximum capacity.
Everything is humming along.
Then the bad stuff happens. You suffer an injury and spend 8 months entirely sedentary. The muscle fiber shrinks as the proteins are degraded to save energy.
Right. Atrophy sets in.
But what happens to all those extra foremen? Does the body recognize the factory is smaller and fire them? Does apoptosis wipe out the extra myonuclei?
This is the critical paradigm-shifting insight of the last decade of exercise physiology.
What happens?
When a muscle fiber undergoes atrophy due to detraining, the extra myonuclei do not disappear.
They stay.
They stay. The overall volume of the cell decreases, the sarcoplasm shrinks, the contractile proteins are disassembled, but the nuclei themselves remain embedded within the tissue.
That's incredible.
The current scientific consensus strongly suggests they stick around for years, decades, and potentially for the entire lifespan of the individual.
So the structural foundation is permanently altered. Yeah. The body tears down the walls of the factory to save on metabolic heating and cooling costs, but it keeps the entire management team on the payroll, just sitting dormant in the break room.
Exactly. And this biological hoarding is why the experience of returning to the gym after a long hiatus is radically different from the experience of training as a total beginner.
Because the beginner has to do two distinct biological tasks. Right? They have to synthesize the new proteins to build the muscle, and they have to undergo the slow, metabolically expensive process of satellite cell activation and nuclear donation.
Exactly.
They have to hire the foreman and pour the concrete at the exact same time.
Yeah, precisely. It's a very slow process. But when the detrained individual returns to the gym and introduces mechanical tension, the cellular infrastructure is already fully established.
The foremen are already there.
The dormant myonuclei immediately spring into action. They are already positioned to rapidly upregulate mRNA transcription and protein synthesis. The source texts explicitly note that because this rate-limiting step of acquiring new nuclei is bypassed, regaining lost muscle mass and strength occurs at an exponentially accelerated rate.
How accelerated?
Often 2 to 4 times faster than it took to build it the first time.
2 to 4 times faster. I mean, that single metric should completely obliterate the despair of losing gains.
It really should change how everyone views a layoff.
We actually have a powerful visual in the case studies that perfectly encapsulates this concept.
The one in the garage gym.
Yeah, it's an image of a heavily muscled woman seen from behind that's standing in a very unpolished, grungy garage gym.
This is very moody.
Very. And the focal point is that she is staring into a wall mirror that is deeply cracked, with shards of reflection mirroring her back and shoulders. The paint is peeling, the iron is rusted.
It looks abandoned.
It does. But when you view this image through the lens of myonuclear domain theory, it takes on a profound meaning. The cracked mirror and the rusted environment represent the messy, broken routine.
Life interrupted her perfectly pristine training environment.
Exactly. But she is standing there, solid. The biological architecture of her past hard work is entirely intact beneath the skin. Even with a shattered routine, the nuclei are waiting.
She isn't starting from scratch.
No, she's just turning the lights back on at a fully staffed factory.
It is a deeply empowering physiological truth. The intense physical effort you exert today is never a temporary rental. You are permanently altering the cellular topography of your body in a way that will serve you and facilitate rapid recovery for the rest of your life. Every heavy set is an investment in your future cellular infrastructure.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of all this data. We have the minimum effective dose showing us we only need 1/9 of the volume to maintain. We have the biomechanics of the 15-minute security blanket protocol. And we have the myonuclear domain theory proving that even if we fail, the bounce back is rapid.
The biology is very forgiving.
So how do we take these biological facts and fundamentally rewrite the mindset of the modern, overwhelmed professional?
We must systematically dismantle the perfectionist guilt. The briefing provides one final, staggering metric to help contextualize this.
What's the metric?
It states that an individual can achieve 70 to 80% of their maximum genetic potential for hypertrophy and strength with merely 2 30-minute sessions per week, provided the intensity and proximity to failure are exceptionally high.
Let me stop and repeat that because it completely reframes the fitness industry. 70 to 80% of your absolute maximum possible results can be unlocked with just 1 hour of total work per week.
1 hour total.
The people who are grinding in the gym 6 days a week, 2 hours a day, obsessing over isolation angles and complex periodization, They're fighting a massive war of diminishing returns.
They really are. They are fighting for the extreme outer margins, the final 20% of their genetic pie.
But for the busy executive, the new parent, the person who simply wants to be robust, strong, and metabolically healthy, one focused hour a week gets you almost the entire pie.
Yet, because the all-or-nothing cognitive distortion is so pervasive, an individual will look at their chaotic calendar, realize they only have two sparse 30-minute windows, and conclude that it is not enough time to make a meaningful difference.
They just skip it entirely.
The most catastrophic error in physical longevity is the belief that if you cannot execute a flawless, optimal program, you should default to zero.
We have a final visual case study that serves as the perfect capstone to this entire discussion.
The beach scene.
Yes. It is an image of a woman, again appearing to be in her 50s, sitting calmly on a heavy blanket on a sandy beach. She is wearing a thick olive-green jacket, her hair is whipping in the wind, and she has both hands wrapped around a dark mug of coffee or tea.
And she's looking out at the water.
Right, she is looking out a truly turbulent, stormy ocean. Heavy gray clouds, crashing whitecaps. It is not a peaceful, sunny vacation day. It is a hostile environment. But her posture is entirely relaxed. She is simply observing the storm.
It is a masterful visual representation of the mindset required for lifelong physical resilience. The stormy, unpredictable ocean is the reality of our lives.
The chaos of daily living.
Right. It represents the sudden project deadlines, the financial stress, the physical injuries, the overwhelming chaos of daily obligations. It is forceful, and it's largely out of our control.
And crucially, look at what she is not doing. She isn't running into the freezing surf trying to punch the crashing waves into submission.
No, that'd be exhausting.
Exactly. She isn't exhausting herself fighting a storm she cannot control. And she also isn't running away in a panic. She is holding her ground on the shore. She sits down, takes a breath, and maintains her position, knowing with absolute certainty that the weather will eventually break. When life gets stormy, your fitness routine shouldn't be another wave trying to drown you.
That is so well said.
So, what does all of this biology actually mean for your daily life? It means we must accept a fundamental, non-negotiable law of human physiology. In the realm of biology, something is infinitely more powerful than nothing.
Infinitely.
A single set of split squats executed to true mechanical failure in your living room sends a profound systemic survival signal that completely halts atrophy. Doing one set of push-ups is not a failure to do 5 sets. It is a massive biological victory over doing 0.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to the overarching timeline of a lifelong fitness journey, we realize that true consistency is deeply misunderstood.
How so?
Consistency is not the rigid, unbroken adherence to a 5-day-a-week hypertrophic split year after year. That is a recipe for psychological burnout and systemic overtraining.
It's just not sustainable.
Exactly. True consistency, the kind that builds octogenarians who can still carry their own groceries and effortlessly get up off the floor, is the ability to seamlessly downshift into a minimalist maintenance gear when the environment demands it, and to do so without an ounce of psychological guilt.
No guilt. That's the key.
It is the maturity to look at a disastrously overbooked week, declare I am officially in maintenance mode, execute your 15-minute security blanket protocol, and recognize that biologically, you have achieved complete success.
I love the analogy of downshifting. It's exactly like driving a manual transmission vehicle.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. When you are cruising on the highway, you are in 5th gear, making great time, building tissue, but suddenly you hit a massive steep incline, like a surge of professional or personal stress.
The storm rolls in.
Yeah. And if you stubbornly try to keep the car in 5th gear, the engine is going to stall out completely. You will fail.
You'll just break down.
But you don't take your hands off the wheel and let the car roll backward down the hill either. You depress the clutch. You downshift into 2nd gear. You keep the engine running. You maintain your forward momentum, albeit at a slower, more sustainable pace, until you reach the crest of the hill and the road levels out again.
And then you shift back up.
Exactly. Then, and only then, do you shift back up and accelerate.
That's the essence of lifelong training.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the source text leaves us with a highly compelling call to action that I want to turn directly over to you listening.
It's a great question to ponder.
Think back over your own physical history. What is the longest continuous break you have ever taken from resistance training or your physical routine? And viewing that memory through the lens of myonuclear domain theory, how rapidly did your baseline strength actually return once you re-engaged with the barbell?
I bet it was faster than they expected.
I would bet heavily on that. If you analyze the timeline, the structural adaptation returned far faster than your anxieties predicted it would.
As you reflect on your own physiological timeline, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative perspective to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we have spent this entire hour detailing how the cellular architecture remembers physical stress. We have explored how satellite cells donate myonuclei, permanently banking the infrastructure of your hardest physical labor.
The foreman in the factory.
Right. But consider the inverse implication of this biological intelligence. If your cells are sophisticated enough to permanently hoard the adaptations of stress, perhaps they are equally designed to bank and utilize the periods of intentional, prolonged rest that you occasionally force upon them.
Wait, that is an entirely different way of looking at a layoff.
It is a necessary paradigm shift. What if these low-volume maintenance phases, these weeks or months where life forces you to step away from the heavy iron, are not merely periods of stalling loss?
And what are they?
What if they are actually the secret, biologically mandated reset periods required by your organism?
Wow.
A month of operating on a 1/9 minimum effective dose might be the exact mechanism required to fully heal chronic connective tissue inflammation, to clear deeply accumulated central nervous system fatigue, and to resensitize your anabolic pathways for your next entire decade of hypertrophic growth.
So the melting popsicle isn't just sitting in the freezer preserving itself. It's actually upgrading the recipe while it rests.
Exactly.
Reframing a forced break not as a physiological deficit, but as a mandatory biological deposit for future resilience. That is brilliant.
It changes everything.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of minimalist maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
We hope the hard science of glycogen dynamics, the Bickel training data, and the absolute magic of myonuclei have thoroughly dismantled the anxiety of the all-or-nothing trap.
Remember the biology.
Remember the exact mechanisms at play. Trust the evolutionary hoarding of your biology, and do not hesitate to deploy that 15-minute security blanket when the storms inevitably roll in. Train hard when the weather is clear, downshift without guilt when it isn't, and always keep it nuanced. We will see you next time.